No. So when you tell me she's a 13-year-old child, okay. Some of the most heinous crimes in this world has been by kids. So I don't want to hear that. That's my family. I don't give a damn what America thinks. But I also want to tell America they can kiss my ass. Don't throw no stones, because they got a whole lot coming their way too. They just feel more comfortable for them to be able to say, well, my sin is not as bad as yours. At least I didn't kill my kids. That in God's eyes, we all down here. That's period.
Okay.
Hey guys, I'm Leah Fields. Thank you so much for tuning into my channel. Happy New Year. It's 2021. This is my first video back for the year. I told myself I was gonna push myself with my content, going more in depth with cases and being consistent. So I'm really excited for this year. Go ahead and subscribe so you don't ever miss any of my videos. So today's case, we're going to be talking about MItchelle Blair, aka Detroit Freezer Mom. Shout out to Lasandis for this recommendation. Thank you so much. I just want to let you guys know also, this case is a bit more heavy than my other videos. There are some disturbing things regarding child abuse, and I'm not going to go, I'm not going to get into every detail. I'll share some, but I'm not trying to get banned on YouTube. So on that note, let's just jump straight into it. MItchelle had a rough childhood growing up. She was raised in Detroit, Michigan, and pretty much dealt with poverty, violence, low-income housing. She grew up in the hood. So, she also didn't have the best relationship with her mother, and her father was allegedly pretty much non-existent. So when she was a child, she was abused and sexually assaulted. So she was dealing with trauma and hurt from a very, very young age.
You mean sexual abuse?
If that's what happened?
That definitely did happen to me. That's why I know exactly how would have grew up. I told my mother what happened to me. And the only thing she said was, it's over with, so what the you want me to do about it? What do you mean what I want you to do? You get what I'm saying? So all I could do is go back and sit in my room and just sit there and look stupid. I'm a kid. And I'm just telling you what happened to me. You didn't do about it. And plus, I still had to see the person coming in and out my house. You still friends with that person.
As a child, she was forced to see her abuser, which was her mother's female friend. And when she told her mother about it, nothing was ever done. So her mom didn't handle it pretty well, and she just ignored it. As a mom, she probably was in denial about the things that was going on with MItchelle, and she didn't want to feel guilty. But this is why y'all need to watch who's around y'all children, because you never know who got the devil inside of them. And if your child is coming to you with like, yo, hey, someone is touching me, sexually and messing with me, you should take that in consideration and try to protect your child. So I'm sure MItchelle grew up with a lot of resentment towards her mother because her mother didn't really take any actions to prevent, abuse at all. So MItchelle, grew up and she became pregnant on her 18th birthday, and she was raising her first child on east side of Chicago with no education. She tried to reach out to relatives for help, but her family stated she was unable to keep a job and would always call them for money. But those calls stopped when they refused to help her, get back into school. Now, as a mom, if my daughter got pregnant at 18, I'm on her ass. I'm trying to help my daughter finish school. Kids make mistakes, but I won't ever just leave her out with no life jacket. And it looked like her family left her on the deep end, because if she's asking for help, hey, I want to go back to school, I want to get back into school, then there's some thought process of, all right, I know I need an education to survive, at least with raising a kid. And at 18, no education, dropped out of school, what can you really provide your child with? I don't know. So with little help from her family, MItchelle and her first baby had to go on welfare, and they were struggling. Over the years, she ended up having 4 kids in total, Stephen, Stoney, Gabby, and Matthew. And Gabby and Matthew identities are currently hidden from the public, and you'll see why later on. But all of the children had two different fathers as well. Alexander Dorsey was the father of Gabby and Stoney, the two eldest children, and Stephen Barry was the father of Stephen Jr. and Matthew, the youngest siblings. So to receive help with raising the kids, MItchelle sued the fathers for child support, because she needed some money to take care of all four kids. But there's also no real evidence that the fathers played a significant role in the lives of their children anyway. So she dealt with anger and a lot of sadness regarding the abuse she encountered as a child. She has no help from the children's father. She's a single mom. She doesn't have any finances to support her children. So, that pain that she was feeling, she would lash out her frustrations on the kids, and she began to physically and emotionally abuse her children over the years. She was burning them with curling iron, pouring hot water on them, starving them, beating them with cords and sticks, and more that's just too graphic for me to get into, especially regarding children. But the living situation was just disgusting as well. Like, I was getting sick to my stomach just looking at these pictures.
These are photographs taken from inside the townhouse where investigators say MItchelle Blair tortured her children.
You had these kids living in this because you're unhappy with your life, so you rather inflict that chaos and spirit of evil on them, and it's just like disgusting. These kids were also homeschooled, not really able to mingle among anyone, no neighbors, no local kids, not even family. They weren't able to go to the doctor either because clearly they would have seen the scars and physical, damage done to the kids. But authorities did visit MItchelle's home before in 2002 and 2005 to investigate reports of abuse to the children. The Department of Children and Families had received a number of complaints through the years that MItchelle's 4 children were abused and neglected. In one instant, it was reported that one of the girls had burns on her hands, and the other children had so much bruises on their body, like there was no way of hiding it. So, one investigator in 2015 took note that there was definite proof of abuse. But despite all of this evidence and the physical disgusting shape of the home, the kids were forced to live there and were never taken away from MItchelle. They basically ignored all of the signs and physical abuse that was going on with the children. It was never handled, seriously, and eventually it led to a horrible discovery.
Well, tonight we begin with that breaking news, a horrific discovery. 2 children found dead, their bodies stuffed in a freezer.
We have new video just in showing the mother, 35-year-old MItchelle Blair, being arrested by Detroit police, her hands cuffed behind her back. What could have led to such a tragic end for these 2 young lives?
March 24th, 2015, in Detroit, Michigan, representatives from a housing authority arrived at a townhouse on the Lower East Side of Detroit rented by MItchelle Blair and her children. She owed them $2,206 in rent, and they were there to serve an eviction notice to her to get her out of there. When no one answered the door, they went inside and discovered that the house was filthy. I mean, clearly. They began to move MItchelle and her family belongings out of the home, and when they made their way to the freezer in the living room to clean it out, as soon as they opened the freezer, they saw 2 bodies. Inside was the body of Stoney Blair. The police also discovered the body of Stoney's brother, Stephen Barry, right underneath her in the freezer. He was only 9 years old and Stoney was only 13 years old. MItchelle was hiding nearby in the area with her 2 surviving children, Gabby and Matthew, and was apprehended by the police. Like, she wasn't that far. So I'm sure everyone there was like shook, terrified, confused. And why would this, mother commit such a dark crime, and not just any crime. She found it necessary to take away her children's life. So while MItchelle is taken in and questioned, investigators didn't have, to do much interrogating when they took MItchelle in, because MItchelle went on to confess to killing her kids. Like, she did not deny it, she did not lie, and she didn't really show any remorse or feelings about it either. According to, MItchelle told them in August 2012, her son told her that he was being sexually abused by his brother Steven and his other siblings as well. The more stories Matthew would tell her constantly, the more violent MItchelle, would become. And she lashed out on the other kids. And at first, the other kids all denied that they did anything to Matthew. But eventually, they caved in and admitted to everything. Now, this does not mean that Stoney, Steven, and Gabby ever did a thing to Matthew. It has been proven time and again that even mentally sound grown adults will eventually, falsely confess to anything after enough torture. These children would have said and done anything to stop the abuse. If that meant coming down their mother, if that meant, stop beating me with a curling iron, stop hitting me, stop pouring boiling hot water on me. So I just want to throw that out there as well. You don't have to agree, but hear me out. If there was some truth to MItchelle's statements as a mom, you would try to find help for your children. Find a counselor, put them in therapy. Call the police if you were that distraught to, get them help before you take extreme measures like killing your children. And investigators and prosecutors looked into the accusations, and there was no physical or emotional evidence or anything at all which indicated that sexual abuse ever happened to Matthew. And maybe this was Matthew's way of keeping himself safe from his mother's anger and abuse, so he wouldn't get abused anymore. All of the children knew about the sexual abuse that their mother encountered. MItchelle would tell them in very detailed what happened to her and tell them how much she hated her abuser. And if there was one thing they should never do, is abuse others in that way. Now look, children are sponges. So MItchelle is telling them, in detail about her abuse. And to be honest, there could have been, a possibility of the children maybe acting on it. I'm not saying that she was lying about the claims, and I'm not saying that the claims, were true. I'm just saying these are all possibilities that could have happened, and either or, the outcome, the end resolution to all of this was still wrong. You don't kill your children. You go and find help. There's too many resources out in this world for you to be, depending on killing your kids. Unless you had that in you the whole time. Unless that's who you are. If you're a killer, you're a killer. There's no denying that. MItchelle also explained to investigators what she did to Steven and Stoney the day they died. MItchelle became enraged about these claims, and she went on to punish Steven. So she put a plastic bag over his head until he lost consciousness, then slapping him until he woke up. She also wrapped a belt around his neck and picked him up with it. She also made him drink Windex, poured boiling hot water over him, and he became so weak and sick, and he eventually died. And the most disturbing thing, MItchelle told investigators that she wrapped him in his favorite blanket and put him in a freezer. So you thought wrapping him in a blanket was something he was doing that was right? Steven was dead in the home on August 20, 2012. And I can imagine, how the kids felt in the house. Engulfed with fear, wondering if I'm next. And the freezer was right in the living room. Psychological trauma. So now for a whole year, Steven is dead in the freezer inside the home. And MItchelle, continued to abuse the other children, which led to the death of Stoney.
Later, Blair is accused of killing her 13-year-old daughter, Stoney, and putting her body on top of Steven's.
Both had been slapped in the face. Both of them had chipped teeth, and both of them had actual tears in the mucous membrane of the inner aspect of the lip.
Dr. Carl Schmidt from the Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office says it took 2 days to thaw the children's bodies before he could examine them, and what he found was nothing short of horrifying. On 13-year-old Stoney, he says the blows to her head were too many to count.
And actually the entire scalp was suffused with hemorrhage, which meant that she had received numerous impacts over the head.
And then there's 9-year-old Stephen, who we're told had countless burns all over his body.
When we see patterns, burn patterns like this, it means that there was some kind of object with 4 parallel lines which left the brand. It's like branding.
So before the discovery, neighbors had inquired as to the whereabouts of the children, and MItchelle would tell them that they were visiting their auntie or that they stayed upstairs because they were antisocial and didn't want to talk to other people. So she was clearly lying to cover her tracks. And all of the children were also homeschooled. So, I mean, they didn't really have much encounter with people in general. They didn't really mingle with kids at all. This is how MItchelle was able to keep their murders hidden for so long, literally for 2 years. And the unethical part is MItchelle continued to collect food stamps and Medicaid benefits for all 4 of her children until she was arrested. So she really did not care about them. Like, she was only about herself. After the discovery of the bodies, and now MItchelle admitted to killing her kids, MItchelle's surviving children, Michael and Gabby, went to live with their aunt, Angela Gordon, who was ironically a child abuse investigator for the Detroit Police Department before she retired after 26 years on the force. Angela claimed that she was aware that there was some abuse happening in the home, but did not fully know the extent. Like, that's any better. You didn't know the extent, so you didn't do anything. If they're getting abused, take them out the house. Why are you even questioning anything? Angela also claimed that she did tell MItchelle she needed to be a better parent, a better mom, but MItchelle wasn't having that, and she cut all contact off with Angela. But like, the thing that I don't understand is the fact that if there were some concerns about abuse, if you felt like there was something going on and you're in this field, take control of the situation. I mean, honestly, the system failed them. The Department of Children, they failed them. The family failed them. Friends failed them.
But her friend shared this very emotional story with us.
I'm like, Angel, why wouldn't you just get the kids to me? She like, Tori. I'm like, why you just didn't give them to me? We could have figured out something.
I feel like everyone failed them in this situation. Especially, they knew what was going on and didn't do anything about it. But I'm pretty sure y'all want to know about the fathers. Where is the fathers in this situation? Did the daddies know to an extent? Did they ever pop up? Were they ever in the picture? And yes. Now, the fathers, Stephen Barry and Alexander Dorsey, stated that MItchelle did not allow them to see their kids from the very beginning, but there are no records showing either man called authorities to insist they be allowed visitation or any effort to be there. Stephen Barry, the father of Stephen Jr., lived with MItchelle and the children for off and on for 3 years. And he described MItchelle as the perfect mom. She never yelled at the children or hit them. But during a court hearing, Gabby, the oldest daughter, said her dad often had to calm MItchelle down when she was yelling or hitting the children. So there were definitely some signs that one of the fathers saw, and I think he just chose to ignore it like everybody else. And Stephen was also in prison for years, and when he was released in 2014, he asked to see his sons, but MItchelle only told him to spend time with only Matthew and not Stephen Jr. But MItchelle told him that, he was angry at his father because he had not made contact, in so long because he was in jail, which is weird off rip. Like, if you're the father, you should know, like, I'm coming to see both of my kids and you only having me see one. Like, no, get all my kids out the house. Let me see them. But he didn't really fight or made any initiative to like, yo, I was in jail, I couldn't really see him, but I'm here now, I'm trying to be a better father, bring my son out here now. He didn't have any of that energy. Meanwhile, he did not know that his son was in the freezer already dead. So while MItchelle is in custody and, everything like that put aside, they're now trying to figure out who is going to watch these kids. What about the fathers? Hey, let's try to figure something out. What's going on with that? In 2015, Wayne County Circuit Judge Edward Joseph terminated MItchelle's, parental rights of their surviving children, Gabby and Michael. And of course, they would she's already guilty. So Child Protective Services suggested that the children be put up for adoption, like they should have done back in 2005 when they ignored the early signs of child abuse. So the fathers eventually had their rights still evaluated by the court, but it was proven that neither father had played any active role in raising their children and owed tens of thousands of dollars behind in child support. So, the court petition said that both fathers are unemployed. Alexander Dorsey was living with a mother and uncle who received disability income, and Stephen Barry was living with friends in a, the house really didn't have much furniture, with no beds, and he was receiving $194 a month in food assistance. So it really looked like to me all of the parents weren't fit to be parents, period. Alexander Dorsey was, trying to do the process of trying to have full custody of Gabby, but, that was revoked by the court, possibly because, his older daughter, Gabby, by then graduated high school and would be eligible for 2 years of college, and she'll be continuing mental health treatment under the care of the state if she was considered, an orphan. So I can see why that was the best choice for Gabby, because at least she's getting professional help and education as being, on her own. Now, Stephen's rights were supported, and he did tell the court that, he wanted the opportunity to have a relationship. But I do want to share this with y'all because one of the fathers, Alexander, wanted to sue the state for not taking any action back in 2005. But a lot of people felt kind of iffy about that, because there were some statements that he wanted money. That's why he was suing. And if he cared that much, why didn't he try harder to see, the kids back in 2005? Like, physically knock down the door. There's an interview from the fathers that I want y'all to see, though, and let me know how y'all feel about it.
Dorsey lives with his mother, and they talked with 7 Action News reporter Kim Russell days after the kids were found dead in the freezer, kept there for 2 years in MItchelle Blair's apartment.
How hard is it to hear them say you should have done more?
It ain't hard at all, because I already know I'm supposed to do it.
The other dad, Stephen Barry, the father of the 2 young sons, the 9-year-old in the freezer and the 8-year-old survivor, came to court late. The state also wants to terminate his parental rights, finding he has 2 firearm convictions and is $12,000 behind in child support.
Mr. Barry, do you want custody?
He quickly left court, not answering any reporters' questions. His attorney also did not speak. The other dad, Alexander Dorsey, hired his own attorney.
Some would suggest he didn't do enough, that one of these kids, his kid, was in this freezer for as long as 2 years.
Many people didn't do enough in this to have a child dead for multiple years in a freezer. Whether, my client has some level of blame in that, I don't know, and that'll be up for the judge to decide.
Now, do you think that was genuine from the father? The father that was crying? Do you think it was sincere? Do you feel like the fathers could have been more aggressive with trying to be present in the kid's life before MItchelle killed them? Do you feel like it's all show and they don't really care much for the kids? Let me know in the comments below, because me personally, I feel like it was all show. It didn't feel sincere. but let me know in the comments below. So June 2015, MItchelle Blair pleaded guilty to 2 counts of first-degree premeditated murder and is now serving a life sentence at the Huron Valley Correctional Facility in Ypsilanti, Michigan. I can't pronounce that right, but without the possibility of parole. MItchelle requested the death penalty actually, but it was declined while being sentenced. MItchelle was not remorseful of her actions at all.
You meant to kill her?
I definitely meant to kill her.
Okay. It wasn't an accident?
No, not at all. Okay. If I had a chance to do it again, I would.
During MItchelle's life sentencing, Judge Dana Hathaway shared a few words about MItchelle's actions. You know, she told her that the greatest tragedy was that she took away her children's chance at a better life. They lived in terrible fear of you, and I find that so sad in this case. She also stated that after all is said and done, you imposed the death penalty on your own children. And after all that was said to MItchelle, she looked at the judge with a stone cold face and responded, "I did what I did." But what makes this whole case sad is the fact that even though she was so honest to committing the crime and killing her kids, she was also blaming her children for her evil actions, and I just can't get over that. There's not even a solid case like MItchelle was a great mom, loved her kids, they lived a good life, her kids were, well taken care of, and maybe MItchelle snapped when she found out her youngest was being molested. That sounds lighter, still unacceptable, but lighter. But she was abusing them for years, all 4 of them, so explain that part. Prior to finding out about the molestation and abuse, you were pouring hot water on them, burning them, starving them. There was, clearly something wrong with her mental state. And I don't care what you think. If your child was wrong, you don't ever get to a point of wanting to kill them. And then you sit in a house for a whole year with a body in a freezer and show no empathy. In that whole year, you didn't feel like, I should turn myself in after that first killing. But you go ahead and kill another child. So now that's 2 children. She was clearly sick in her mind, and it's disgusting and disturbing to know that she's not remorseful at all and, took those babies' lives because of her trauma that was never really dealt with. So the community was in distraught and mourning the lives of Stoney and Stephen. So they had a candlelight memorial in honor of the children. There was a lot of people that attended this candlelight. Neighbors, the Detroit City Councilwoman, Mary Sheffield, spoke during a prayer vigil in honor of the children. State Representative Sherry Gay was singing hymns. Angela Gordon was there, the kid's auntie. She said she really hopes that MItchelle received psychiatric help that she desperately needs. In April 2015, there was a funeral held for Stoney and Stephen in Detroit. Family and friends all attended. It was just a sad day for everyone, friends, families. But honestly, I really wish they just took more into consideration. These kids were missing for about 2 years. I don't know, maybe I'm being a little too hard. But then again, no, I'm not, because this is the same. This is why, a lot of kids are fearful to tell people that they're being abused sexually, physically, emotionally, because some kids, and I do feel like maybe, when it comes to the African American household, it's ignored, and it's almost like you kind of have to just deal with it and be strong and just handle it. But that's not healthy. That is a big problem with the African American community. It's almost like we're forced to grow in pain, but we never really deal with it. We never really we never really like find help. We never really go out of our way to like, dang, I don't know, y'all. Like, this was just heavy. It was heavy. Like, this video was heavy because I couldn't understand. And I know I'm like rambling about it, but like I just couldn't wrap my mind about it. And maybe because like I have a daughter myself, I have a 9-month-old. And honestly, if she was telling me this, if I wasn't there for 10 years, if I wasn't there for a year, if I was never there has to be something in you that's like, but she's a child. These are kids. You can't abuse these kids like that. You can't do that. And especially it's worse with Angela because she was already in this field. You were freaking helping other children get out of homes that, you know, they were being abused. So why didn't you take consideration of your own family? You know why? Because you didn't care that much. It didn't really matter to you that much. They'll deal with it. Yeah, they'll deal with it. They're dead now because of your lack of care, your lack of being attentive to certain things. I don't know, but back to the case. So currently in 2019, there were some new charges placed on MItchelle Blair, but it had nothing to do with the crime she committed. And she was still not remorseful of the killing, you know, at all. You know, a public information officer for the Michigan Department of Corrections said MItchelle was accused in 2 separate incidents. In the first one, he said Blair allegedly put her urine and feces in a Pringles can and threw it in the face and chest of a corrections officer while they were trying to remove her food from a tray. The second incident happened while Blair was being escorted down a unit hallway. She began yelling at another prisoner, and as you know, the officers tried to, you know, come and stop it, she started punching and hitting the officer. So now MItchelle was sentenced with 2 charges where she will be serving 2 additional sentences of 38 months to 5 years on top of her life sentence. So, I mean, I can clearly see why she's up in there acting like a queen pin, because she's in there for life and she's not remorseful of killing her children because she believes that, you know, she did a good thing by protecting her youngest son by killing the other children because they were abusing him. Like, she really is sold on that thought and idea.
But I also want to tell America they can kiss my ass. Don't throw no stones, because they got a whole lot coming their way too. They just feel more comfortable for them to be able to say, well, my sin is not as bad as yours, at least I didn't kill my kids. That in God's eyes, we all down here. That's period.
Okay.
But I love and I love and I'm always love him. That's my son.
But I just feel like that's a way of just being manipulative and trying to cover up what you really did. Like, and honestly, she's gonna have to deal with, you know, the sins that she committed. Whether she feels like she, you know, did a good deed or not, what you did was still wrong. This is the story of MItchelle Blair, the Detroit freezer mom.